Yeah, so rugby sevens at the moment, there is another Olympic Games in 2021 scheduled for. And so as an opportunity for myself to go, the RFU and other companies, they don't know what that's going to look like contractually. So for me as a rugby player, I was aiming to transition on my terms and give myself opportunity and give myself options so that mental space as well as physically, I was in the best
Yeah.
possible position because optimal performance is a mixture of both within rugby. It's you can be physically, you can be in the best condition you can be, but mentally you're making decisions all the time. So I needed to be in a position where if I'm going to do a cycle and do another year, I need to be in a position where I'm ready to transition. This year really helped me because I was aiming to do that with the companies. I was giving myself the work experience. I was giving myself the exposure. I was giving myself almost a springboard to leave when I wanted to. And then, as with anything, a global pandemic comes and it knocks you down a little bit. But then, for me, that's just been a case of where I've sort of stepped back a little bit and almost reconnected a little bit with what I want to do,
Right.
what I find enjoyable about myself, and then also reaching out a little bit more to my network and contacts. So before I was trying to transition on my terms. Oh, sorry. I was trying to transition on my terms, and I was trying to sort things out for myself and all that sort of stuff, the sort of the way that I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And then in understanding that was all, I wouldn't say falling apart, that's a strong term to use, but it was something where it was falling away. It was a case of, right, well, I need to reach out and I need to ask for help and I need to get support from others, which is exactly what I was doing in my sporting environment. But stepping away from sport, I felt like I wanted to try and achieve. I wanted to be Phil Burgess, a businessman, as opposed to Phil Burgess, the rugby player. When throughout my whole career, you had your teammates, you had everyone to fall back on. And so this just helped me because it said, actually, go back to what you're good at, go back to what normally happens, go back to your roots almost and be like, support, ask for help, be yourself, be honest, and be open. And so I connected on LinkedIn with lots of people that I'd met and had positive conversations with. And yeah, from there, everything sort of spitballed into a whirlwind of conversations, Zoom calls and discussion, which for me has been fantastic because I always knew that I liked working with people. I always knew that I had an affinity. I was able to connect with people and I enjoyed being able to help out and do things like that. And so in connecting with all these people, understanding what they do, whether they're coaching or whether they're leading a sales team or telemarketing team, whatever it is, it was interesting for me to hear the experiences that they have leading and doing things. In my head, I have these moments where I think, well, I've done that in a rugby environment, or I've had to step back and not say something because I want the team to learn and experience it themselves instead of me telling them to do it. And there were all these transferable things that I'd had from rugby that I was very aware of in the last few years because I wanted to go down that coaching route. I wanted to do it. But then when you hear people talk about it and their experiences with it and how they have got a lot more out of their team, I think actually this is somewhere for me. Like I could make a real difference. I may not know commercially what the business needs to do, but I know what people are like, and I know how the interactions work, and I know motivationally and all that sort of stuff. I'd like to explore that opportunity, and so that sense, it's been great for me having the sort of uncertainty around where I'm going or what I'm doing, because it's meant that I needed to open my eyes a little bit more about what else is out there in different industry, rather than going down this one sort of aspect to be like, this is what you could do and this is how you help people and whatever. There are all these other opportunities to help, and it's not just the people, it's the culture, it's the values and everything like that, which at the rugby club that I was playing at, the Sevens, we were very fortunate that we led all that. We were guided by our head coach, and he was very clever and he was very smart in terms of how we provided that information, how we created it. Obviously, it was guided in that sense, but only coming out of that sort of situation, you realize how skilled he was at it, and allowing us to develop that and allowing us to develop something that we feel so strongly and passionately about. Which is something that I love now. Like thinking back to it, 7 years ago, you asked me about it, I'd have been like, oh no, it's great because we get to decide all this and we get to, tell our values and we get to say what we care about and everything like this, when we were being guided under that with the guise of this is free thought, which it was, but we were being led in a direction which was positive for everybody.
Yeah.
And 7 years down the line, it's created a culture which, as a team, we're incredibly proud of. And yeah, so that's
amazing.
I just waffled on for a long time there.
Amazing.
So sorry, but that is me.
That was perfect. Can I ask it? Can we explore a couple of things that you've just said in a bit more, right? So
yeah, I'd love to.
The first thing that you've just touched on 2 or 3 big leadership challenges in the corporate world, either knowingly or unknowingly, right? So the first thing you said that was really interesting was I was trying to do it my way, and then I realized that actually I needed to almost step into your kind of discomfort zone of asking for support and help and getting curious and putting yourself out there. How did you come to realize leaders don't want to do that, right? A lot of leaders want to do it their way, and they want to be very independent, and they want to drive their own business the way they want to drive it, but that doesn't work. So how did you come to the realization that you needed to draw on support and build a network around you?
It was a mixture of using my experiences from rugby, understanding what I wanted to do. I wanted to leave on my terms. I wanted to do it. I wanted to prove that I could step away and I was capable of doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me this sort of ego. Ego is a wrong word, but that's kind of what it is. This ego of you can do it. You can do it. I can do it myself. When in reality, you can still have an ego, but it's about being open, and it's about asking for help, and it's about you want to be the best leader or best businessman, whatever that you can be. And in doing that, to be the best up here, the only way you get there is by having this support with you. And so I don't know whether it was a moment of realization. It was more a case of you don't have to do it all yourself. You've got nothing to prove to people in doing it yourself. Everyone asks for help and asks for opinion and asks for perspective, because rugby, we did that all the time. We would offer help. We would ask for help. We would say, after training, for example, we'd say, I need to get better at my defense or my tackling or my kicking or whatever it was. And we'd say, can you just help me hold a pad, or can you help me do this? Because I need to get better at it. And then in doing it, you would do it. And then they would sort of say to you, oh, have you thought about doing it this way? Or can we try, if I do a bit of footwork or do something differently, or have you aimed for this or done something else? So it gave me perspective in terms of my rugby and helped me get better in that aspect. So I thought, what's the difference in this business sense? It's just using a different team. Mm-hmm. I think there was an element in me that was scared in terms of trusting others with my feelings, my worries and stuff like that, because within the Sevens group, we were very, very tight knit, and we could talk about everything and anything that worried you or whatever, because we were so open about it. And you almost, as soon as you left that environment or you're in the real world, you become a little bit more guarded, because you can be burned and you can be hurt. That's not the type of person that I am. So it was surprising that I was like that, but it took me to be like, actually, you don't need to do that. That's not you. Ask for help, ask people for opinion, and then, everyone's willing to help. The amount of people that I've spoken to that are like, let's have a conversation, let's have a chat. And even for me, that's just opened up other avenues of thought, which have made me think about what I'm doing and what I could do better and what avenues I could go down, which I wouldn't have ever had before.
Yeah.
I was thinking about trying to get into an industry and try and learn and try and better myself in an industry, when actually all I'm trying to do at the moment is I'm learning and I'm trying to better myself without being in any industry, if that makes sense. I'm just speaking to all sorts of people. And so I guess it was just a moment of being true to myself and true to what has worked for me what have I really enjoyed and what's worked for me in the last 7 years. It's been a reliance on, yes, trust my own ability and trust my thoughts and trust my opinions, but also ask for help. And, don't be so proud that you can't say, I'm actually really stuck with this decision. Can you help me?
Yeah. Awesome. And you've hit the nail. You said it's not the right word, but for at Luminary Mindset, we're actually trying to help leaders step out of their ego. And we're actually using that language now to say there is a time and a place for egoic leadership, and it's not a wrong thing. And it's not wrong to have ego, because we do need pride, we do need competitiveness, we do need drive, we do need motivation. But at the same time, there are moments you've just described where people need to step away from that and go, actually, what is true to me? How am I going to be authentic as well? So it's perfect language. Yeah.
I think ego as well brings with it, it's not confidence, it's arrogance. When you can be confident and you can be a confident leader and you can ask for help. But I believe if you see yourself with an ego, it inherently you feel, I've got an ego, I'm confident, but I'm arrogant with that. And so I can't ask for help because it'll make me look weak, as opposed to confident leaders can say, we're in this together, let's work together and let's help each other. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
With the leadership that we had within rugby, we relied on each other as much as we had a leader, we had a captain and head coach. Anyone could voice any concerns, and there were only times when business critical, I imagine, the leader has to go, right, we're doing this because we have to do it right now, and that's what it is. And then after, you review it and you see what happens. But generally, the chances are that you can ask for help, review things, and take your ego out of it, hopefully.
Gosh. Yeah, let's talk about that more. So an example in the corporate world where that doesn't work is there's a lot of people that are operating in fear. And if they speak up and if they say what they think, they're either going to lose face, get shot down, or they might be discredited, and they might be at risk of missing out on a promotion, losing their job even, right? So there's a lot of fear culture in the corporate world. And you've described what sounds like a really open, fearless culture. Is that tell me more about that? How did that work?
I think I wouldn't say fearless. I'd say it was safe, in the sense that we would prepare ourselves for tournaments. We prepare ourselves for games by, firstly, a little while ahead of it, probably a week or two before a tournament, we would talk about our worries and talk about our fears and apprehensions and talk about things that potentially could go wrong. An example of that can be, we would talk about what we call them red triggers, which would be things that could crop up that would maybe send us off course, maybe cause you to get angry or upset or worried or whatever it is. And so we would talk in a meeting, and we would say, I'm worried about all my family coming to a tournament and then me having to spend time with them in between games when potentially we may have lost the game, and I need to get into the right mental space and stuff like this. And it would be an opportunity for people to hear each other talking about it and say, okay, that's great. Well, you can see your family up until the tournament time, and then in between games, you might have 3 hours. What works for you? Do you need an hour? Do you need 15 minutes? Do you, like some people in not going to see their families would get more frustrated and more agitated, and actually go and see their families would make them more relaxed, rather than others might just want to be like, headphones, I'm sitting in a changing room, I'm doing my own thing. And so the environment that we created offered the opportunity for people to talk about worries and talk about fears. And it wasn't just rugby, it was everything. Family related issues at home. Some people talked about financial things and whatever, so that you knew what was going on with people, so that you could ask, not everybody, because it wouldn't be a case of all 20 guys would talk to all the 20 guys about specific things. It would just mean that you might have one guy or two guys that you might go for a coffee with and just sort of say, I'm struggling with, so I've got a little boy at home, and it's almost like, I would struggle sometimes when I was away because I'd miss him. And my wife would be sending me videos, which would be awesome, but in the same way, it would make you upset that you're not seeing things. And so for me, I would talk to two of the other lads that were on tour with us at the time, a lot of the time anyway, who have boys at home as well. And so it wasn't that we were there sort of wallowing in our self-pity at all. It was there we were supporting each other around things that we had in common. And that just made us even closer as a group, because when someone was maybe a little bit, I wouldn't say abnormal, but they weren't themselves, you could be like, oh, is everything okay? How are things at home? Because that was an issue for people, rather than some of the younger lads, for example. You might be like, oh, is everything all right? And they're like, oh yeah, I just ruined my favorite t-shirt or something like that. It's the same sort of worry for those guys, but it's just understanding it and being able to talk about it. And it just meant that although we were a really tight group of 20, we had this sort of intertwined relationship where some guys would talk to others about certain things, which made us stronger, because support network, you could speak to someone else and go, actually, one of the boys was struggling with, his mum's not very well at home at the moment, so just give him a bit of break. You understand, if he doesn't want to come out or he doesn't want to do something, don't push him on it, and don't rib him about it or anything like that, because you understand where you are, because you understand people's personal situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the environment of feeling safe with that was great, and it was something we really had to work on, because at times the team would have been together for sort of 3, 4, 5 years, and there would be some of the academy guys, some of the younger guys that would come in, and we would have to try and break down these barriers and almost show them that although I'm a senior player, that I've played for a long time and I'm really experienced, I'm really, really good, I worry, I make mistakes, I'm the first one to put my hand up and say that's my fault, and that's what it is, because it gives them the opportunity then to go, actually, it's okay, because he's played 50 tournaments and he's supposed to be one of our best players, but he's admitting he's made a mistake. And it wasn't that I'm like, oh, it's my mistake, I'm completely wrong. It was more, I can do that better because of this, and this is how I can get better, and I need your help to do it. And trying to encourage them that part of my development involved them specifically. And I was very fortunate to work with some of the younger players, and I really enjoyed it, because it gave me an opportunity to ask them about their situation. And at times I had 18-year-olds, so I was 29 at the time, so massive gap in age, like 10 years. And so you can imagine the maturity of myself versus some of the maturity of sort of the 18, 19-year-olds coming straight out of school. And they were always the best players at their school. They were always amazing at doing this. And sometimes, and then you'd ask them a question, and if they knew the answer, whatever, they'd be like, yeah, this is it, I've got it. And then if they didn't, no, they wouldn't say anything. Or if they'd seen themselves, they'd made a mistake, they'd be like, they wouldn't say anything. As opposed to the environment we tried to create was, you're reviewing something, for example, review the situation, try and take yourself out of it and review the performance of the side and say, player A has done this, player B has done this, and the outcome has been a try or something like that.
Smart.
If it was me and someone else, if I'm defending, I'm like, I didn't have what I needed from other people, because I'm trying not to blame myself, as opposed to the culture wasn't blaming me, it wasn't blaming the other player, it was, how can we get better? And so the improvement culture meant that you weren't blaming anybody. There wasn't any your fault, my fault. It only ever became something of an issue when it was the same mistakes over and over, and people weren't trying to get better. And that was something that we really hammered home, was you're absolutely fine to make mistakes, but if you're making the same mistake 10 times, then there's a bigger issue that you need to look at. It's almost a case of, you make a mistake, that's absolutely fine. I think is it Kaizen principle of learning from your mistakes, and like, it's okay to make mistakes, but continually you can't keep making the same mistakes. And so that was sort of a principle that we used, especially for some of especially for the younger lads. It was for everybody, but it just had different guises, because people's skill levels, people's perspective around the sport was very different, and people's awareness of themselves and the team are very different. But yeah, I think a very long-winded answer, but it was just the ability to create an environment where people felt safe, that you weren't going to be criticized for something that you've done, because if in the rugby environment you're only doing it, I guess in any environment, you're only doing it because, one, you think it's the right thing to do, and secondly, you're trying your best to do it. And so we always rewarded people for trying things and trying to do their best. And if it didn't work, you would review it and say, how come it didn't work? What happened? Okay, was it a bounce of a ball? Was it something else? Okay, was it technique? Okay, well, let's practice the technique, or let's do something differently to try and get a better result or better outcome next time. We were fortunate that in creating our culture, or forming the culture, I'd say, rather than creating it, we try to encourage people to do that. And yeah, having guys come in that were 18 years old, it meant that they were in a position where we were constantly battling with their sort of school mentality of being right or wrong
Yeah.
versus the outcome of how was it, how did it go, what did we learn. And I think that was something that, for me as a person that liked coaching people and like helping people, I thought that was really interesting, because I formed some great relationships with people by just asking them questions and just almost asking them, take yourself out of it. Who, player A and player B, what does this situation look like? And always it would look different. As soon as you took emotion, took yourself out of it, people would be like, oh, well, that guy should have, he just overchased, or he shouldn't have made that pass. And then you're like, exactly. Just simplifying it for people. And then from there you can build on as the maturity and the understanding went on. But it all came from a safe environment that we tried to form, make people feel safe, that they could talk about anything, and that there was no no stupid worries or no stupid questions. It was almost ask a question, because for me, my biggest fear each year, no matter what year it was, so even last year, so 7th year playing professional rugby, 7th year playing in Dubai, first game on day one of the first tournament of the year, I remember warming up thinking, can I do this? Can I do this? Like, am I able to do this? And that was my red brain kicking in again, saying, you've done all your, and then you treat it with the blue, you've done all your training, you're fit enough, you're good, you can do everything you need to, and you're fine. But every single time that trigger will be there, and it's a case of how you deal with that. And so that was one of my fears that I always said to the boys. I was like, I'll always get that first game, it will be, can you do this anymore? Because you haven't done it for so long. You have that fear, and it's not a fear of failure. For me, it was a fear of letting my teammates down.
Right.
Knowing, it wasn't so much that I was like, you can't do this. It was more a case of, if I don't do what I need to do, then my teammates are going to suffer because of me.
Yeah.
And that was an environment that I loved, and I loved thinking about, because I had a fear for my teammates rather than just my ego in that sense, because I was more than happy to not do it and help the team out, but I knew that I could have done it. And they'd have to pull me off kicking and screaming if I wasn't anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. I used to play, this is I can't believe I'm about to tell you this, because it's absolutely no comparison. But in my world it is. I used to play hockey at school, and I was the goalie. Yeah. And I had exactly the same. I was so terrified of letting the ball in, because I knew that I was the last, that was it. Once the ball got to me, it was probably game over.
Yeah. But that's,
I don't want to let anybody down.
No. And that's it completely, isn't it? And it's just your perspective of that. And I think it's interesting within different sports as well. You can have the mindset of certain players, for example, completely different. Like netball, for example, the goal shooter and goal attack. You're the only guys that are ever going to score. So if you don't score enough points, immediately that's your fault. Right. And you're almost like, well, is it your fault, or is it still the collective from the team and everything like that? And that's where being bigger than the team comes into it, because you're like, oh, it's my fault. And it's like, yeah, you can take some bits on the chin, but it's almost a case of, right, how can we be better as a team?
Yes.
Is it the opportunities that were created for you defensively, say for yourself in your hockey games? It's almost like, yeah, you're the line of defense, but if you're having to try and save 25 goals, it's almost a case of
they're not doing
quite a lot
right,
of goals.
Are they?
Exactly, but it's one of those, and it's understanding. Sometimes you'll let a goal, and that's just the way that it is. But it's understanding the bigger picture of that. So that I love that element of sport as well.
You've just said I wish I'd written all of them down, because you've said 5 things. I'll try and remember them that I want to ask you about. So, but let's stay on this one, because this is really, really relevant. So corporate leaders, execs and CEOs, the people that I work with, they have had to develop it. They've had to use a certain number of skills to get them to that position. So as you're climbing the corporate ladder, you do have to be a good team player, but you do also have to be a little bit more egotistical in your performance. You've got to be a bit more mindful about the politics and how your different chess moves are going to reflect on you and your identity as a sort of a corporate animal. And then when they get to this leadership level, they've then got to let that all go. They've got to shed it, and they've got to become, like you say, bigger than the team. They've got to become someone who can let go of that ego, and they've got to become someone who can empower others to perform. Is that the same thing in sport? Do you have to go through that process of transition, or do even the newbies start with this kind of shedded team support, togetherness kind of culture?
No, I think it's a learned behavior.
Right.
I think it's a maturity thing.
Yeah.
I think it's environment, and I think it's whether it's encouraged. So inherently, in some people, some of the younger lads were inherently more emotionally intelligent or more mature than others because of their life experiences up until they were 18, 19, as opposed to others who maybe have been in, I don't know, sort of more closed off environments. They would come and this would be their first experience of either leaving home or doing all that sort of stuff. So they let loose a little bit, or the opposite, they go into their shell a bit more and stuff like that. So I'd say it was a learned behavior, but it's something that is learned within the environment, not just at work, but also outside. So the younger lads would be living with other younger lads in sort of an academy house and stuff like that. And so it was about trying to form a relationship with the group as well as the individual, to be like, right, this is the larger group's goal and this is how we're doing it. And then within that larger group, you'd have a smaller group, which was, say, the academy guys, which were still in the larger group, but their ability to go home together, for example, a lot of the senior guys didn't live together, live with partners, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They would be together all the time. And inherently, you get into an environment where someone asks you a question and some of those guys are immature or uncertain. That feeds immaturity and uncertainty within that group. And so all you need to do is almost pick people out in that group and almost keep sort of chipping away at them and being like, do the best that you can, be positive, make mistakes and help each other. And then that will hopefully rub off on the group. They're seeing it in the big group, it'll rub off in their little group. So when they're at home and they're watching training, which we were asked to do every day, review training, you'd be watching it and you'd be thinking, oh no, I made a mistake. And then someone else would just go, oh, but bigger picture, what happened? Like, no, was it this? Was it your positioning? Was it this? Or what was the outcome? And it would just help grow that.
Yeah.
So the reliance on each other, I think, is important.
Yeah.
I do wonder though, when you were saying for execs and stuff about their sort of holding on to their ego and then shedding their ego almost once they're at their top and releasing it, is that not incredibly difficult because you will have other guys in the business below them that they're, sort of leapfrogging and working their way up. These guys are still going to have that ego down here.
Yeah.
And then you're at the top and you're trying to be like ego less almost, or I don't know what the phrase is, but you're trying to portray this and be like, it's fine, this is how we need to be. It's difficult for those guys to see that in levels below you. Would it not, I guess once it's at the top, you can then encourage it to come down, but could you not work your way up with that same view? I don't know. This is your experience versus my experience.
So the last 30 years, so probably the last, well, I don't know, I've got just over 20 years experience, but I know the last 20 years, the way corporations have designed their culture is, it has been very egotistical. So to get to the top, you use your ego. But what that's done is it's created global corporations that are very focused on money and bottom line and profit and shareholders, and less focused on people and communities and sustainability and future, solving future world problems. What the corporations are now realizing is actually we can't continue like this. We can't continue using our ego or our red energy to drive business performance. We need to be more authentic. We need to be more concerned about the greater good, and we need to be more concerned about sustainability and our people. So it's actually part of the transformation of the corporate world that's happening now. So leaders who want to shed their ego are working with people like me, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are still trying to drive that same behavior. And all corporate culture, as you all know, because we'll come on to this when we talk about your head coach experience, all corporate culture starts at the CEO and the exec level, and then the behavior they demonstrate is then what then gets reflected in the business. So you're absolutely right. They once they do let go and shed and start being a more authentic leader, sharing their worries, like you said, I want to talk about that, because they don't share their worries, they don't share their personal problems, they don't bring their home life to work, they don't encourage it in the workplace. The corporate world is almost like somewhere where you go to separate from your life, and then you're meant to just deal with your life separate to your work, which doesn't work, does it? Because
No,
you
not at
can't
all.
separate the two. So this is
They directly affect both. So
exactly. So everything that
yeah.
you've just said is 100% relevant to what needs to happen now and over the next, say, 5 or 10 years for global corporations to actually survive the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the ego side of it is something that I keep thinking about myself, and how I I wouldn't say I was egotistical at all, but in trying to transition away and going into the corporate world, you almost try and have an ego because you need to be protected by the people that I met at certain businesses. You're like, what one instance, for example, I went for lunch with two partners at a big four firm, and I went in there and I was myself and I was honest. I was straight down the bat, and they just did not respond at all to it. And for me, I left that meeting being like, that's great, and I'm sure they're nice people, but I don't want to work at their company because they're supposed to be my boss. How can I talk to them on the same level that I want to if they're not going to talk to me at that point? And
Yeah.
so I was very taken aback by that. But in the same way, I was like, if I work somewhere, I want to work somewhere where I could talk to people and be myself, and I don't have to pretend to be a certain way, because
Yeah.
that's not what I'm about at all.
No. Yeah. And
Right.
that's part of the challenge. That's part of the challenge. Hang on, do I want to use the word challenge? Opportunity that I've.
Opportunity, yeah.
That's the opportunity that I have, because I
Mm,
can speak their language. Not that it's me, and I do, and then I speak it with the knowledge that I'm speaking it to have them build trust and have myself build credibility, so that they will then listen to the parts of my dialogue where I'm saying to them, "You've got to let go of this shit because it doesn't work."
yeah, yeah, for
But for them
sure.
to hear that message, you have to get past that filter that they've got, which is, are you the same as me or are you not? And if you're not the
Yeah.
same as me, then I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah, yeah. What are your experiences? Are they the same as mine? No,
Yes.
they're not. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't respect you in the same way, which, is pretty short-sighted, but that's just what I think.
Really is. And the problem slash opportunity that we have is those companies and the big, like, I intend to try and work with at least 10 of the top 50 companies in the world, because they're the ones that are going to make the difference over the next 40, 50 years.
Sure.
And if they don't shift their mindset, it's not gonna work for any of us. But you're right, they've got this listening filter, a listening filter of, are you the same as me or not, and what does that mean? It's
Yeah.
fascinating. So
No, no, it is.
the other thing you spoke about, like, I am fascinated about these conversations, right? So you're all having these like up close and personal conversations with one or two fellow, sportsmen that you trust, and that's
Mhm.
the word that I want to talk about, because in the corporate world we are not encouraged to do that. There is not an encouragement around vulnerability or sharing your life. People do, but it takes quite a long time to create those relationships. So how do you maintain the trust? Because people must slip up, right? They must say things that they don't mean, or how do you keep the trust going when you're being that close with each other?
I think it's just about being authentic.
Yeah.
I think trust. I'm a very trusting person, and so and I think the leaders that we've had in our team are good listeners, and they're honest and they trust people, and so they tell people how they feel and they ask questions and they listen.
Yeah.
um, but I wouldn't say that anyone's ever really slipped up by talking too much about how they feel or what they talk about, because I think we as a sevens team, we would spend a lot of time with each other when we go away and tour and all that sort of stuff. And so inherently you're in each other's pockets, and sometimes you rub each other up the wrong way, or like, yeah, a bit like a family in the same way,
Yeah.
like you're in each other's pockets. But it just gives you the opportunity to ask questions, and ask questions because you want to know more about them, and like you want to know how they work, because the way that I used to see it was, I want to know more about them because they're not the same as me, and they've come from different environments, they've done all sorts of stuff. And secondly, I want to be the best team that we can be, and whether that means performance wise, that's a byproduct of what it is. But to be the best team, I think if we care about each other, and that was something else that we spoke about, was if we care about each other, and we used a term that people hate, and people think, oh, you can't say that, you can't say that. But if we loved each other and cared about each other in that way, when people were upset or when people were happy, we were happy and involved with them. And so we could buy into things. So when people had children, when people broke up with girlfriends, all that sort of stuff, it was a case of, we were there to support each other when we needed to. We were there to give people a hard time when we needed to. We were there to ask questions when we needed to. And sometimes you get that wrong, you miss your opportunity. But that's where having a group of players doing it, you're more often than not going to hit the nail on the head, if that makes sense, as opposed to miss the nail completely. But yeah, I think we were just, it started from the talks about how we felt and what we were worried about, because as soon as you opened that door, it meant that whether it be that session or the next session or the next coffee you go for or whatever it is, someone might have an opportunity to talk about what it is that upsets them or whatever. And then it's almost a case of, okay, well, once you've got that opportunity to talk, there are elements where we asked, actually, performance wise, how do you respond best on the field? Do you want me to shout at you? Do you want me to ask you a question? I mean, like, in a story about myself. So when I was growing up, my dad used to come and watch me play rugby and all this sort of stuff. And I always remember, like, if I ever missed a tackle, I could always hear him on the sideline be like, oh, you missed a tackle or whatever. But that for me was him showing his frustration or whatever. But for me, I don't mind people saying, get frustrated or shouting at me or whatever, because I've dealt with that sort of stuff for a long time and I understand where it comes from and I've dealt with it, as opposed to other people who might actually get really internal if you were to shout at them or say something, even if it's supportive. The level, the tone that you're using can really affect people.
Yeah.
And so we had discussions around what works best for you. So one of the players, for example, no matter what you were saying to them, if you shouted at them, they couldn't hear you. They wouldn't listen, because immediately it sort of turned something in their brain, whether it previous experiences, whatever it was, you wouldn't get the best out of them. So it was like, right, how do I get my message across to this player? What do I need to do to make him either come back into the better frame of mind or work harder or whatever it is? And it was to talk to him and just say things. And then there were other bits where you learn, how do I break this person's cycle, this sort of negative spiral almost, or something like that? How do I do it? And you'd learn. And there was a great example where one of the players was in a negative spiral after a bad incident on the field. And another player always rolls him up, always gets into him. He knew how to break him out of it. And so an incident happened. I think they scored a try or something like that. And we're walking back to halfway line. And one of the guys was really beating himself up in a bad place. He was in this negative spiral. And the other player just turned around to him and he literally just stuck his middle finger up at him. Like that. He just stuck his middle finger up at him. And all that did was the guy broke out of that negative spiral because he laughed. And he was aware that he was like, it's just rugby, like, and performance wise, his frustration and everything like that wasn't helping the team. And knowingly or unknowingly, the other guy was incredibly mentally strong and incredibly mentally smart in that position, because right, how do I break him out of this cycle? And then he thought back to his experiences and how he responds to that player. Yeah. And he did something off the cuff and it worked, because that instance, thinking about it now, makes me smile because I think it's just funny, but it was something that broke the cycle and put him in a better frame of mind.
Yeah.
And that only comes from understanding each other better and asking the question. And that's not like sitting down and being like, right, we're going to have a talk about what makes you tick, what works. It was just natural sort of conversation, but a real inquisitiveness around each other to help each other get better, because we were aware that to be a good team, you can perform on the field and you can do that sort of stuff. But in terms of enjoyment and memories, which is what we wanted to create, winning is a byproduct of a lot of different things. It's not always performance. You could be the best team on the day and not win.
Yeah.
And then you're in a position where you're like, well, I did everything I could and I'm the best player, and why didn't I win? Rather than the experience and the journey that you go on can get you to that position where you might come up short and you're like, actually, I've grown and I've developed so much in that time that is the experience, that is the win. It's people sometimes say, oh, that's a bit of a cop out or whatever, winning and all that sort of stuff is really important. And yeah, don't get me wrong, we're all really competitive. We all want to win, but whenever you're in a race, everyone wants to win.
Yes.
So you can't, so you imagine like all 7 of the 8 guys that are in the 100-meter final, 7 of those guys are going to leave the race depressed because they haven't won. No, I don't think that's fair, because you're leading yourself up for failure, because you're not going, one of you is not going to win.
Yes.
One of you will, but when you do win, what's that going to bring? It's not going to be like, it's not that eternal glory or anything like that. It's just one instance. And then as soon as that's over, it's over, it's done. It's the experience and everything that you've done beforehand leading to that moment is what's important, because you can do nothing before and sit in your room and, lift weights or whatever, get there, win, and then go, oh, that's great, I won this, and what did I learn? What did I enjoy about it? That's our experience, and that's what we tried to create within our team, because we understood everyone wants to win. We understood that it was highly competitive, and we understood that within rugby specifically, you're a bounce of a ball or you're a decision or something like that away from a win or a loss. Yeah. And so understanding the process of getting there and understanding the joy of putting everything out there and working hard and enjoying each other's company and all that sort of stuff meant for a richer experience. And the byproduct would hopefully be the win. But if it wasn't, you'd be that close to being in a position where actually, like, we had a bloody good time though, didn't we? And the win wouldn't take away from the fact that you still had that really good time. That just might be the cherry on top as opposed to actually having the cake. It's a bit of a weird analogy, but something like that anyway.
Powerful, because too many organizations don't focus on the winning. They're not even clear on what a win would look like, and when people do win, they don't celebrate it. It's just next. This is continuous, what I call mountain climbing, and you think you've got to your peak, and then there's just another peak, and then you think you've got to that peak, and so that's a really good analogy.
I think there's a philosopher that talks about I think it's Heracles or something. He talks about the same man being in the same water. So he talks about a man walks into a river, and in terms of experience, everything like that, he's not the same man. The water passing him by isn't the same water, so the experience is all different. So whether you win or whether you lose, the experience is what it's all about. Like the moment passes you by, the moment's gone. But if you're always searching for something else, you're never going to reach it. Which is incredibly difficult, because I think Alan Watts says that as well, doesn't he? He talks about you're always searching for the greener grass or the win and everything like that, and then you get there and you're like, oh well, now I'm 55 years old and like I haven't lived my life. And even just like having those sorts of discussions with our team and like with the people, it makes you more appreciative, because sometimes you can get ahead of yourself sometimes on certain things, and people just keep you grounded. And we have a group, a WhatsApp group called the Culture Cult, which is like slightly, we have different aspects of groups. So like a group where you'd be informed about training and all this sort of stuff, and the culture group is literally just stuff that people like. And there's a couple of guys on there that that fill it with really nice quotes or videos and stuff like that, and it's just really nice to just go on there. And sometimes you can just go onto the media thing and just review what people have put on there, and there's moments of they're really kind, people being really kind, or people helping each other out, and nice quotes and things like that just bring you back down to earth. That maybe if you're either in a bit of a grump or you're a bit ahead of yourself, whatever it is, and it's just a bit like, actually we're all just little ants running around this world doing something, and there's always going to be someone in a worse position or a better position than you are. Like, you've just got to make the most out of your position and make the most out of your situation that you can.
Absolutely.
It's a really nice thing.
You've got this stuff nailed.
Well, I think we're just lucky that we were in this group of good people, like we had good up the top, within our team, we were just good people. And I think we were very lucky that there are a few guys in there that were open, were honest, and were just like, this is what we need to be about. And there's some guys that have suffered some horrible injuries and some horrible situations in their life, which affected everybody, which just made us stronger as a group because we experienced them, and for me, for example, like touch wood, I've been very lucky and very fortunate in my life to not have anything directly really affect me, but it will happen.
Yes.
And some people have had a lot in a very short time, and it makes you appreciative of your situation, but then it makes you more appreciative of their situation, and then also how they deal with it and how you can help them deal with it. And we're just incredibly lucky to have that. And that's my saddest point at the moment about potentially leaving the team and stepping away from the rugby, is that, and also potentially losing that squad, is that group created something that I was incredibly proud and am still incredibly proud to be involved in, but it's been trickling away in the last 3-4 months because we haven't been able to be together in the same way. And that's where the interesting thing comes in the future for business and stuff like that, is to try and create this, but how do you maintain it in a potential environment where you may not see each other all the time, you may be virtual, how does that manifest itself to sort of keep those conversations and stuff like that? That's another challenge for another day maybe, but that's another challenge which I think is interesting about our group now going forward. How would that maintain in this circumstance?
Definitely. Oh my goodness, it must be, I can't imagine what it must be like, knowing that something's coming to an end that you've held so dear for so long and invested so much time in. That's tough.
No, it is. It's actually, it makes me a bit like eerie almost. It's no, but it's one of those that it's I've been allowed to be myself in the team, and that's what's been really, really nice, because the team has allowed me to do that. And I was very privileged.
Big deal. And the stuff, so now what I'm thinking about is, okay, gosh, how is this human being that sat before me, who's had this amazing experience with these amazing people, and you've been allowed to be so authentic towards yourself for so long, how are you going to cope in a world that isn't geared towards that?
Yeah, well, this is a thing. I want to try and find an opportunity or somewhere where they want me for me, and that was another thing that I found in this sort of transition period, was I need to be myself in it, and I need to be able to transfer not just my skills, but I need to transfer me across, because I want to be able to connect with people.
You have to.
And if I can find that environment, then that will be great. But I want to try and find that. And there are businesses, I'm sure you've seen some, and there are people out there that are willing, but I honestly believe that, I hope that this group of players that we have here, when we do disband or whatever it is, people go into other things, I really hope that the strength and the quality of men and women that we've had can affect others.
Yes.
And almost, like affect that. And it's only a small thing, but hopefully that can affect something bigger.
Yes.
But it's something that we will need to maintain and be true to ourselves. Because as you say, like it can get lost quite quickly, I think.
Oh, it really can. People are losing themselves every day at the moment. Like, you can see it happening, especially with what's going on in the world right now.
For sure.
People are in fear, they're in survival mode, and they're making decisions that they wouldn't ordinarily make. So wow. Okay, I have still got so many questions. Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible.
No problem at all.
You have got so much to offer, and I will of course do anything I can, if I can help at all, in having you find that perfect organisation or people or whatever it is.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I would love. I'm going to write this in an email to you as well. But there are 3 things that I haven't asked you about that I'd love to know more about, or at least I think maybe might be
Sure.
helpful for you to think about if you haven't already.
Yeah,
Your,
no, that sounds good.
yeah, your formula for performance. I don't
Hmm.
know if you've actually. Have you kind of created your formula for performance? So if someone were to say to you, if I was to sit you in front of a prospective client and they'd say, "Okay, Phil, explain to me what you know about performance and why I need to learn it from you." Have you got that for crystallized in your
No,
mind?
um, no, I don't think so. I think I have my opinion on it, and I have an opinion on how it can change and manifest in different situations. Because for sport, its performance is very different. Like when you're injured, performance is walking again. Like I had a neck injury, I don't know what, 4 years ago, and I couldn't lift any weights on my right hand side. Like, and it's almost like performance for me would have been about lifting a weight or doing something like that, as opposed to performance for someone else might have been passing a ball.
Yeah,
And so I think it's very individual, but it's easy. If you know the situation, I think performance can be um, identified relatively easily.
yeah,
Um, but I don't know. I guess you could maybe get sort of like an idea of what it looks like
yeah.
for each situation, but it would have to depend on, I think, the people as well in that environment, maybe.
So
Um,
something interesting. Okay, something that we might, if you wanted to, we might unpick that if we talk again. If you want to catch up
yeah,
again,
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
you-
definitely.
you've said a lot of things on this call that are
Yeah,
uh,
sorry.
no, 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 in a really good way. That was in no
Okay,
way.
okay.
Don't cut me off at that point. That
No,
sounds
no, no,
really
no, no,
bad.
no, no, no. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. That's all
That's too funny.
good. No, no.
Said a lot of
Yeah,
really good things on this
see you later.
call.
Yeah, yeah.
But because the perform for me, performance isn't about it isn't about the doing, it's about the being.
Mhm.
So the lifting the weights and the passing the ball is the doing, but there's a being element. So you were talking about your red mindset, your blue strategies, your trust, your relationships, your courageous conversations, your ego, or, so all of that. I reckon inside of you somewhere you've got a really shit hot performance framework that could would be magnetic for prospective clients to see and hear you talk about, because you articulate it really well as well. I'm just not sure you're aware that you've got that framework inside of what you were saying.
It's not written down anyway.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I know what you mean.
but there's a formula that you've just described that is really, really, really valuable. The other thing that we didn't touch on that I'd love to explore with you more is you talked about, as a team, we were empowered. You didn't use these words, but what I felt was we were empowered, and our head coach was there, and he was guiding us, but we really were able to make the decisions and calls ourselves, and do it the way we felt best to do it. And that is something that the corporate world really needs more of. And
Mm.
how did you observe your head coach behaving, but also how did the head coach behave when you didn't perform, and all of that kind of conversation I think we need to have, because that's
Mm.
really important for the corporate world to learn. And then,
That
and
was that was development of our team.
was it?
That was yeah. So I think Simon, our coach, had always had that plan of what he wanted and what
Yeah,
he had aimed for, and what he needed from us. And it was like, looking back now and doing sort of the reading and the coaching books and the strategy and everything like that I've looked at now, I can see when he came in 7 years ago, he had this idea of getting a certain type of person, certain type of player involved, which he could develop into a certain way, and then almost get to a point where he would diminish his responsibility and almost give more responsibility, and then it would almost be a guide as opposed to other things. And yeah,
right.
interestingly for me, reading books about really good coaches, there's so many things that other coaches have done that I can see that Simon's done in his um, coaching with us, and challenging players and doing all that sort of stuff, which at the time you're not aware of because you're in it. But then afterwards you're like, actually, yeah, no, I know why he's done that. That's,
Wow.
and his ability, he was a really, he is a really clever guy. And his ability to, I think, have that plan helped him, because he knew what he wanted to do down the line.
Yeah,
And it was a case, right, how do I get there? And we were the the cogs almost to get there, and
Yes.
each, the progression as it went is of what he wanted each cog to do, and how it went to work and stuff. So it
Wow.
was interesting.
Amazing. Gosh, he sounds like, yeah. Well, you're all awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, him, and there were a few guys, so Gareth Southgate, him, the David Brailsford, I think they were like a UK sport sort of coaching sort of team. So they're tip top coaches in that sense. And I actually thought Simon might leave sport and go into business, because in terms of financially and stuff like that for his family and whatever, that might be avenue he wants to go down. But for it might be similar maybe to yourself, like you want to impact change, and you can do that at a certain level. But for Simon, he still wants to involve within that rugby environment, that sporting environment. That's what drives him, as opposed to the people side of it and the effect.
Yes.
That's his sort of driver.
Okay, got it.
Maybe, but I can't unpick his head. He's a very clever guy.
And the other thing you said that I'd love to talk to you more about in the future is, and talk about it now as well. You said, people don't like to use this word, but you used the L word, which I throw about all the time. I think it's really important that people understand that care and trust and relationships are love, and the corporate world needs to get more comfortable with that, because you showed it when we were talking about the potential for you to leave the team and what that meant for you. It's a really emotional thing when you're a high performing team. It should be about that, shouldn't it?
Yeah, completely. And this came about from, I can't think exactly what it was. It was almost like we were trying to formulate some words, so it wasn't our values, but it was something to describe what we were working for. And we split into little groups, and one of the groups came up with love and things like that. And then we were all joking around. I don't know, have you seen, there's a Will Ferrell film, what's it called, Semi-Pro, where he's like, ELE, everyone love everyone. And like we joke about it all the time. And it became this thing, and then it became something more serious because we were speaking about it. And the only reason we didn't use it as one of our key words was because the connotations and the wording of what it and what it stands for, we knew what it meant for us, but as a word it was something different almost. It's hard to describe. Like it's a love, but love was has connotation, especially for some of the other guys, of being something different to what love is. The couple of chaps that sort of really sort of pushed forward with it, like they're very, like their love is very different to, say, like my love in that sense, but we completely understand what we meant by it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
And I've come into that aspect because I feel over time, the best way to describe the feeling is a loving feeling.
Yes.
And, care and emotion and all that sort of stuff. Love is a perfect way to describe it. But I think if you were to try and describe that to 18, 19-year-olds coming in and being like, this is what it means, and love, it would be like, well, no, what love? Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. But then when you're in it for so long and you care about it and you're invested, love naturally, you may not know it, but love is something that has been created.
Yes, it is. Totally.
Yeah.
It's that connection, and it's that intimacy and that vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
And care, and that completely shifts your judgment of one another, because you've got a different list. Your filters are almost clear. Your clean filters, no judgment, just love. It's lovely. It's beautiful. Yeah. But like you say, I can't go into a new client meeting saying, hey, I'm going to encourage a culture of love in your organization.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, if someone's been in that environment, like for myself or someone else, you can be like, actually, yeah, I know what you mean. But if you don't, they're like, that word is just, yeah, exactly. Yeah, crazy person. You're crazy.
Those big four partners would be running out the door going, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, she had too many drinks again. Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. Oh, thank you. I'm just conscious of your time. Oh God, yes, run over massively. Thank you that was incredible.
No problem.
That was incredible.
Thank you so much.